not enough snow to go skiing, not enough water in the rivers to do anything. So I decided to keep myself entertained messing with all of the gimmicky plastic welding crap that is on Amazon. I'm basically throwing out the low-lying fruit of no way this would ever work and skipping straight to the What we're gonna do is mess with some of this stuff and see if any of it works while I'm working on this ninja project. So I'd like to start with a little myth busting, meaning many people have heard a rumor that they need to perfectly match the plastic in their boat with the donor boat, i.e. if you had a red wave sport, you need a red wave sport. No, that is not true. So case in point being these cutting boards I make. That is all HDPE from many, many different kinds of boats. They all melt and blend together. So the only exception to this is if you're not welding linear plastic. What does that mean? Well, there's linear and cross-linked plastics that have been used in kayaks, really only in the kind of letter series era of wave sport, so the X, the Y, the Z, and the 2007 to like 2011 maybe Jackson boats. You know, no, there are no markings, there's no way to know. The way that I kind of spot them is they're very shiny on the inside, like abnormally shiny. Usually the inside is about as shiny as the outside. The inside will be shinier in some linear boats. Just my trick. But really, who's welding a boat that's more than a decade old anyway? So here's the nugget of truth behind that rumor. Theoretically, if you have a boat that you are welding and you have a donor boat of the exact same plastic, that would mean that the melting temperatures are as close as you could theoretically get for welding, which is beneficial. But, you know, thickness and other things are also going to come into play. So it really isn't like necessary, but you know, in an ideal world, it could help. So here's what we got. Traditional hot air welder. So the idea behind this thing is that once heated up, I'll be able to shove these HDPE welding rods down this little tube and they'll come out the bottom as I melt and heat my way across. I only have to heat up this tiny amount of space, so that should reduce the negative impacts to the surrounding area of the boat, prevent distortion and stuff like that. There are more expensive versions that are used by kayak manufacturers and prototyping, things like that. And I've always wanted to try one of these things, but I've never had a good enough excuse. Now we get to the other one, which is one of those things that you see on Amazon all of the time. Wow, this kit has way more than I thought it would. But basically the idea is that by putting a DeWalt battery in to this knockoff tool and then putting a metal clip into these two, when I push this, it heats up and will melt that tube in and then lock that into the boat. So that will support both sides of that crack. And, you know, definitely not watertight, but maybe it'll hold everything in place as I weld and then add structural integrity down the road. What I'm definitely hoping is that at minimum, if I had this in my truck, I could just pop this in, dab a couple of those in, a piece of tape over the top, and we'd be back in business. Typically, when you're repairing a crack, what you would do is you would drill a hole out at the end of each side of the crack. I'm just not doing that in this case because this wasn't a stress fracture that happened over a lot of time. This was a single massive impact. So I don't think that there's any reason to do that. And what I'm going to wind up doing is using those clips to hold everything down anyway. So that should be that reinforcement I need going forward. So here is that metal clip. And the idea is that when I hit the trigger, this thing's going to start warming up. And I should be able to push in and twist into place. Oh, yeah, you can already see smoke coming off this thing, so that doesn't take long at all. Let's see here. Oh, wow. That is pretty much already red hot. And give it A little wiggle, and then a little twist to lock it in. I'm definitely solidly in the plastic. So now I should be able to just bend these back and forth, and yep, they snap off. Oh, there it goes. That was easier. It is holding the crack together such that it's not going to wander off on me, and it's going to allow me to start holding this together elsewhere. So given how open and jagged this crack is, it is doing something, but based on the way that I can wiggle the ends and just snap it, there's no way this would work on its own. This itself is still waterproof. It didn't melt through, so the actual area that you would have to weld and add filler material to make this waterproof again is still just the crack itself. So there is that. So I'm gonna run the rest of the way up and see if I can just hold things in place and tack, and hold things in place and tack, and make this gap right here slowly close up. Okay, well, that was a dozen put in. There's definitely a trick to it. You want to, like here, you can actually see the wire. I didn't go deep enough. There are other ones, like the one next to it, where I didn't kind of twist at the end, which thing you want to do to kind of lock it under. You can see on this last one, I was kind of pushing the plastic around so it would wrap around the wires. This little doodah is acceptably quick and dirty. I really do think almost anybody could use one of these things. Would be very handy in like a seat repair or something like that, where it does not actually have to be waterproof. And I do think if you put enough of these in, you could put a piece of duct tape over the top of it and get back to both structural integrity and waterproofness, but there's gotta be a better way. So now we're gonna break off all of these little pins and get to the more traditional style of plastic welding. So that lovely noise is the welder unit heating up. So basically that blower pushes air, and then there's a heating element in the handle itself that is superheating that air and putting it exactly where we want it to go. I am just going to time-lapse this and see what happens. Absolutely no promises. I hate actual hot air plastic welding, and you know, case in point, because it just broke itself. Good start. So that felt a lot more like welding than anything I've ever done before. Like welding though, you could really tell when you were getting a proper penetrating connection, and you could tell when you were basically just hot gluing plastic on the plastic. So let's take a look. You can tell as we get close that it definitely did its job. There are going to be places up there where this is just almost a worst case scenario weld, and I'm never going to be able to weld inside of that. So this will probably wind up just being tape or something. But for the most part, I think this has potential. So I think the only way to really check to see if this is any good at all is I'm going to try to use a hot air blower or something on low to push air against the outside and see if I can feel pinhole leaks. That would tell me if this was watertight at all. Then I'm gonna grab a mini sledge and pound on the boat. That should tell us if this is gonna hold up or if it's just gonna fail. We'll give it kind of a easy 1 or 2 and then the full hit. Holy shit, that flexes without a pillar in there. I wasn't expecting that. I can't believe it just held up to that. All right, let's see. Yeah, that cracked it through. You know, if there had been a pillar in there, it would have been fine. That boat absolutely just got walloped. All right, so we are welded back up. You know, I flexed the deck to the hull. I'd still call that a win. So a combination approach definitely would be one of the best ways to go. The hot air welder that I am using here is extremely good. Using one with the remote handle setup is awesome. And I'll put a link to everything down below. Basically, this turned it into hot glue. Making sure that you get that penetration is super important, but as you feed everything in, there's a notch on the back side of that nozzle, so as long as you go in the right direction, it forces everything down in the way it's supposed to go. And within a couple seconds, I had figured out what I was doing, and when I re-welded the boat again, it was super easy, super consistent, and I was getting really good results. I've tried doing this the wrong way many times without the right tools, and I will tell you that it is very worth the investment. By the time you fix a couple of things, this thing is more than paid for itself, and it's gonna be one of my favorite little tricks. So I'm very excited on this. I hope you learned something.